Welcome to Mijas International Interview Section, and I'm pleased to say hello to Sandy Malone, the Managing Editor of the Key to Mijas Costa magazine, and tennis champion and coach Jenny Hoad, and Dan Hochberger, who is ATP and tennis entertainer as well. Now, as I was saying, there's a special garden party and tennis festival going to be held at Lew Hoad's Tennis this Sunday, the 20th of September, and funds raised will go to Cudeca Cancer Care Hospice. Good afternoon, all of you. Good afternoon. Yes, nice break, Sandy, back with us. That's wonderful. And who is this gorgeous girl in the Key to Mijas Costa magazine?
You'll see her on the posters. I was Sol Optic at the opticians near Iceland. Her name's Mariana Puquia.
Ah, okay.
She's a young girl, actually. She's quite young.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, caused a bit of a...
She won the competition for being relaxed and looking the most glamorous, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And, of course, everybody can catch up with what's happening in their local community in the Key to Mijas Costa magazine. Yeah. And I'm really pleased that you could come to talk to us today, both of you. That's wonderful. I'm just going to ask, that big racket here, how did you come by this, and is it used?
Well, one of the local coaches who has been coaching on the coast for a long time knew what we were going to be doing on Sunday with this wooden racket mix-in tournament for Cudeca, and he said, I have one of the rackets that were made in the late 70s and during the 80s by all the racket companies as a promotion for their rackets for shops, and you can play with it, even though it's unwieldy. It will hit the ball back.
I think that's a great one for beginners, isn't it?
It's very heavy.
Yes, I picked it up earlier and I was quite surprised at how heavy it was. I'm going to start with you first, Jenny, and just remind everybody, although I don't think they need reminding, that you're an Australian former tennis player. 1953, you won the junior singles title at the Australian Championships, reached the singles final and the final of the New South Wales one as well, runner-up of the Victorian Championships in 1954, and you won the singles title at the South Australian Championships in January 1955. So you've been very, very busy, and you also became, I think it was runner-up with the doubles with, who was then your boyfriend, but obviously afterwards your husband, Lew Hoad, tennis champion as well.
Well, yes, that is true. It's such a long time ago. That would have been in the 50s.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you know more about it than I do now.
It's amazing what the internet can tell you.
Exactly. Well, we used to play all the tournaments in the Australian tennis season, which went for 2 months in the summer, November, December, and then the Australian Championships were always in January, still are. And we used to move around from state to state and play whatever tournament that state was in. And junior tournaments too, where all the juniors represented their states. And so we got together for 2 months and we made great friendships. In fact, you know, we still keep in touch and know a lot of the players. So now we're all
good.
Hitting a ripe old age. But
yeah. Well, you do tennis coaching, don't you, as with Dan?
We have coached a lot together, and we still do the odd bit of coaching. Dan does it more or less full time. I just do it occasionally, but I'm not running all that well these days. Need bigger tennis shoes.
I bet you can run faster than me.
No, but it's still a very good idea to try and keep moving.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And the tennis club itself, Lew Hoad's, was formed a long, long time ago. How did that all happen?
Well, it happened in about 1968 when I came to Costa del Sol to stay with friends in Torremolinos. I didn't even know where the Costa del Sol was, but somehow found my way there and had a lovely 3 weeks and was so happy in the place. Of course, it was then pretty basic. I mean, even the coast road was dirt.
Yes.
One car every 25 minutes. But the countryside was so lovely and sort of, I just couldn't wait to get Lew to come and have a look because I thought it was a great place due to the wonderful weather, which it is true. It's probably the most reliable climate in the summer anywhere, for months and months on end. And so he came on his way back from South Africa to join me here. and he loved it too. So we had a lovely time and wonderful time trying to find a hillside or an area which was a little bit protected from the wind, and we did find this little farmhouse with a few acres, and about 30 acres, and decided that was the place. So the following year we came back with our 3 children and our dog.
Oh my goodness.
From Australia.
That was a big move to make, wasn't it?
It certainly was, and it was hard packing up and leaving, and I think we left an awful lot of stuff behind we even forgot about. But it worked out very well. It took 3 years more or less to establish the tennis courts and the clubhouse, and we had a tournament in 1971 with quite a few overseas tennis players, and Manolo Santana and all the Spanish boys played from the Davis Cup team. And that's when we formally opened it.
Oh, wonderful. What exciting times, weren't they?
It was quiet, but it was still very simple, the area, but it was still lovely.
And if I can add to that, one of the reasons is that in the late 50s and 60s, tennis players were not earning very much money. If you're an amateur, of course, you earned virtually nothing, and even as a pro, they weren't earning anything near compared to what the pros earn now. And one of the alternatives that they had after their playing career was to open a tennis center. And many tennis players, ex-top players, opened tennis centers, and they became the centers where all the next generation of players came. The players now, of course, earned so much money they don't have to have a post-career you know, as the former players did. So.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point to make there.
And on Sunday, talking about opening the club, we'll have a very special moment of during our tennis show after the Woody tournament, where it was going to be a surprise, but okay.
Oh, good. Did we hear about it first? That's excellent.
Where 4 generations of Hoads will be playing tennis on the court that they built at the same time. At the same time.
We're going to try.
Oh, that will definitely be a wonderful thing to see.
It'll be different.
Yeah.
It won't be going for very long, our little section, because I'm not sure that the little one's going to hit the ball over yet. They're being obliged to try.
They'll have a good go, I know they will.
Oh, definitely, well, you know them.
Yes, I do, and they definitely will have a good try. Very enthusiastic. The club itself did attract lots of famous people such as Deborah Kerr, Sean Connery, Stuart Granger, Richard Burton, people like that. And Lew trained a lot of people, didn't he, who came, went on to be champions?
Yes, he did. A lot of Spanish players he gave a lot of time to. He taught the Spanish Davis Cup team, or he more or less trained them, and a lot of juniors that were attached to the Davis Cup team who went on to become really good players. The best ones at that time were Manolo Santana and Manolito Orantes, who was from Granada, and Juan Aria, I think he came from Valencia, but they were really good boys, and they did train very well. Lew made them stay in Fuengirola and run up the hill every day.
Oh, did he?
And then run back down again twice a day to make sure that they got a little bit of extra exercise.
That was an amazing thing to do, wasn't it?
Yes, and they adjusted to it after a few weeks. And he wouldn't let them eat quite so much food at lunchtime. He knocked out 1 plate of food for each one of them. He said they were overeating, and he didn't like them to wear dark glasses. He said that might affect them a little bit, because they weren't in those days dark glasses which had proper lenses. They were
they affected the line of the ball in those days, didn't they?
Well, the perspective didn't work out as naturally as it should, and so it took them quite a while to adjust. So they really worked hard, and then the other people that came in those days who were known were quite a few film stars. I'm not quite sure how that all happened, although Sean Connery had a house down in Antalya, down on the coast here, Atalaya Park.
That's right, yeah.
And he had a very nice little house there, and so he was happy to come up. Kirk Douglas came with his wife, and Deborah Kerr, she lived in Los Monteros.
Right.
She had a house with a husband who was a writer on the golf course, and there were quite a few others. Oh, I can't even remember them. But the tennis players did come because a lot wanted to train, and Lew did change quite a lot of their small faults that he felt were in their game, like adjusting a grip a little bit with a serve, or teaching them how to get to the net faster, or just do different shots. The top spin wasn't quite so prevalent then. We sort of, in those days, you had a flat forehand or backhand, a little bit of a roll on it, or a slice. But it was quite a long time after that the big heavy topspin came in more with Borg, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And Vilas. And so it was very easy going then. Everyone got on with everyone else. And then Richard Burton did come down and stayed with us once because Lew's secretary got married, and so they were friends of ours, Richard and his wife Susie. And so we said, why don't you come to Paloma's wedding? And nobody actually knew, or very few people knew who he was. He spent most of the night drinking with the gardeners. They had a great time. Didn't know who he was.
Wonderful times. We are going to talk about the tennis festival very soon, but perhaps to know a little bit more about yourself, Dan, as well, because I believe you were a teammate with Jimmy Connors just before he became top of the world, and you've done tennis coaching all over the world, haven't you? So, you know, through the decades, you've just trained, I presume, champions as well.
Not as many champions as just as local people and families, and because it was the way that I was taught tennis in a family situation, and so I knew how much fun that was to be part of a family that played tennis, or be part of families, and I continued that when I came to Europe. And then when I started to train for a company that Lew and Jenny and I worked for, we were at tourist centers all over Europe, all over the world. Jenny and I taught in Thailand, and in Turkey, and in Africa, and I didn't concentrate on specific players, because I knew that was also a situation that can end virtually from 1 hour to the next. And so, and then if you've put all of your eggs in that basket and the basket turns over because someone got a bit moody, then you're back to
square one, aren't you? Yes, yeah. And you, obviously, people used to play with wooden rackets, and just recently apparently you had to string one for somebody, for a client, didn't you?
At the sports center where I work in Berlin, in Germany, a player came in with a racket and asked if it could be strung, and none of the people that strung there could string it, and he'd already been to 4 other shops, and my wife, who was also a tennis player, she said, my husband Dan can string that, and so I strung it, and the hard part wasn't stringing the wooden racket, it was that he wanted it strung with gut strings, and I mean, gut strings hasn't been used in normal rackets for decades, and you have to be very careful stringing, and I used to be able to do it quickly, but that one time, and it has become so expensive that if you make a mistake, that's But anyway, so that was
very specialist then. And I presume a lot different playing with the modern rackets now as to the wooden ones.
That's an interesting thing that we talk about before we do these wooden racket seminars and mix-ins that we do, is that when you hit the ball with a wooden racket, it goes over the net. You hit the ball with not a modern racket, but the rackets that we use now, it goes over the net. The feeling is perhaps a bit different because of the material. The result on how the ball goes is not much different when you're hitting it in the relative middle of the racket. An interesting point about pros, and that people who have played in several generations of professional tennis, said that the pros from before, players like Lew Hoad, didn't hit the ball any slower than the best players do now. The difference was that then there was only a handful of players that could play as well as Lew, and now there are not hundreds, but there are hundreds of players that can hit the ball that hard and compete at that level, and that's because of the equipment. But and that if Lew and his generation and the generations of wooden racket players who were at the top of the world were playing now, they would still be at the top of the world, because they would be playing with these rackets that the players are playing with now. Because these new rackets make it easier for players, for average players to be better,
even better,
and for just club players to make fewer mistakes.
Okay. That's good to know, thank you. Now, for the tennis festival on the 20th of September, can you explain to everybody what you're going to be doing?
Well, it's a variety of events. In the beginning, we're going to have just a normal mix-in the morning, Sunday at 10 o'clock, where people come every week, and even if they haven't been there before, or their standard is not particularly good or not particularly bad, I mean just a variety of standards, and they play for 2 hours and mix around a bit, change partners, and just have a very nice time. It works out very well. It's usually very even. So that will be the first thing to happen. And then after that, we're going to have a little children's program.
Oh, lovely.
With as many little ones as we can find who can have a go. And that will be a few sets here and there and practice, and that will go for an hour or two. And then in the afternoon, I think 4 o'clock is the time, isn't it, Sandy, 4 o'clock? We're going to have
yes.
the Woody Racket event, which a lot of people are longing to do it, but they're very nervous about trying because they're scared it might not work for them. But in all honesty, what Dan just said is true. If you can hit it with one racket, you can hit it with another. It just might feel a little bit different.
Yeah.
And a wooden racket, still being a natural fibre, still has a good feel about it. You just don't want to have a heavy one, because in the old days, some players used a very, very heavy racket. I mean, for example, Donald Budge, who won the first Grand Slam in history, he used a racket which, of course, was wooden back in the 30s, 1939. His racket weighed something like 15 ounces.
Oh. It's like over 420 grams. That's which is like almost double what a lot of players use now. Just normal club players, not pros. Pros have. Yeah.
So we'll have the wooden tournament, and Dan's going to organise that with people mixing around and changing partners. And I'm not quite sure how the format is, but we're not certain how many people will be there, but it really doesn't matter.
No.
Just you can accept everybody and they'll have fun.
Okay.
An interesting statistic is that, I've looked at the statistics, the number of tennis players there are now and over the years, is that there are still more players right now who have played with a wooden racket at all than there are players who have never played with a wooden racket. So that's interesting.
Because that's true, isn't it?
Because it went so long into the era of even when players, when half the players were using wooden and half weren't, and then there were still players that were playing into the late 90s with wooden rackets. Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be quite a fun-filled day, isn't it? As far as the tennis festival is concerned.
Yes, we hope. We hope it'll just be fun for everybody. They'll relax and enjoy it, and not get a problem or think they have a problem because the racket's not the one they're
just to have fun, really.
It's a unique situation for people that used to play with the racket. Say, oh, geez, I remind myself I used to play well, and I still play well with it. And people have never played with it. I mean, children can't imagine what it's like to play with a wooden racket until they play with it and say, well, that's not a lot different than mine, just that it feels a little bit softer. And then following that, then we'll have a 1 hour tennis show that Jenny and I have done over the years when we're at hotels, and I've done that several times. And it's a unique thing. It's not a match. It's sort of a presentation of the things tennis coaches talk about among themselves.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds interesting. That's why you're described as well as tennis entertainer, because you organise wonderful events like that. Wonderful. Thank you very much, both of you.